Revelation 13. The dragon stood on the shore of the sea.
Now, I normally use the New King James Version. It's what I prefer to use, but this app doesn't read it for me, so I use the NIV. But this says some manuscripts said I. So instead of the dragon stood on the shore, it says, and I stood on the shore. And the New King James says that. And I think it makes more sense. I don't know anything about the manuscripts, but that's what makes more sense to me. He says, I stood on the shore of the sea.
And I saw a beast coming out of the sea. It had 10 horns and 7 heads, with 10 crowns on its horns, and on each head a blasphemous name.
All right, now this beast that comes up out of the sea is very similar, if not identical in many ways, to the beast that Daniel describes in Daniel chapter 7. Daniel saw 4 beasts in Daniel chapter 7. The first was like a lion, the second was like a bear, the third was like a leopard, and the fourth, in verse 7 of Daniel chapter 7, says, the beast was dreadful and terrible, exceedingly strong. It had huge iron teeth, and it was devouring, breaking in pieces and trampling the residue with its feet. It was different from all the beasts that were before it, and it had 10 horns. I was considering the horns, and there was another horn, a little one, coming up among them, before whom 3 of the first horns were plucked out by the roots. And there in this horn were eyes like the eyes of a man, and a mouth speaking pompous words. That's Daniel 7, verse 7 and 8. And you'll see many similarities to this beast that comes out of the sea. Now, I'm almost absolutely certain that Daniel was talking about the 4 empires. The first beast was Babylonian Empire. The second was Medo-Persian. Then there was the Greek, and then there was the Roman. Many times in many different visions and dreams in the book of Daniel, we have those 4 kingdoms or empires mentioned. And the fourth one is when the Messiah was supposed to come during the 4th beast, or in the 4th kingdom, to establish his kingdom that would last for all eternity. And that 4th kingdom is the Roman Empire. So this beast, the imagery that we have in the book of Revelation, is taken directly from the imagery that we see in Daniel chapter 7. And the beast described in Daniel 7 is almost certainly the Roman Empire. So I continue that thought in Revelation as well.
The beast I saw resembled a leopard, but had feet like those of a bear and a mouth like that of a lion.
All right, now, in Daniel, he had 4 different beasts. One was like a lion, then a bear, then a leopard, then the dreadful beast. Now, this beast, it's just one beast, but it has different parts of it look like those same 4 animals. You've got a lion, a bear, a leopard, and then the dreadful beast. So still, it's many similarities here. So this should have, if anybody understood or had read or was familiar with Daniel, this imagery would draw them directly back to Daniel's prophecies. And I believe that's what it's intended to do. Say, remember what Daniel said? Now is the time of fulfillment of Daniel's prophecies.
The dragon gave the beast his power and his throne and great authority.
All right, so the dragon, it said in the previous chapter of Revelation that the dragon is that great serpent of old, the devil, also called the devil. So the dragon is the devil, and the beast is the Roman Empire. And it says, Satan gave the Roman Empire its power.
One of the heads of the beast seemed to have had a fatal wound, but the fatal wound had been healed.
Okay, so now the heads of the beast would be the heads of the Roman Empire, which were the Caesars. So the heads are different Caesars, or kings or leaders or rulers of the Roman Empire. I don't know exactly what the reference would be to the fatal wound. I don't think it's talking about a physical scar on somebody's face. It's possible it is talking about that. that one of the Caesars had a scar on his face or something. But more than likely, I think it's symbolic of something else.
The whole world was filled with wonder and followed the beast. People worshipped the dragon because he had given authority to the beast, and they also worshipped the beast and asked, "Who is like the beast? Who can wage war against it?"
So the people were mesmerized by the Roman Empire. They even worshipped the Roman Empire and said, "Who can wage war against the Roman Empire? We're so strong. We're unbeatable. We're the strongest kingdom that had ever came around. No one could ever defeat the Roman Empire." That's the attitude that people would have about this great and dreadful beast.
The beast was given a mouth to utter proud words and blasphemies and to exercise its authority for 42 months.
Now there's another reference to 3.5 years. And the Roman Empire lasted way more than 3.5 years. So I think it's symbolic of something that I really don't understand at this time. So if you have any ideas, I would like to read about it.
It opened its mouth to blaspheme God, and to slander his name and his dwelling place, and those who live in heaven. It was given power to wage war against God's holy people and to conquer them.
Now, I think at this point, God's holy people is not the Jews, not the physical Jews. This would be Christians. God's holy people at this time, when it was written, after the establishment of the kingdom and the church, God's holy people would be people of all nations who were believers in Christ. And the Roman Empire certainly had power over Christians and killed many Christians.
And it was given authority over every tribe, people, language, and nation. All inhabitants of the earth will worship the beast, all whose names have not been written in the Lamb's book of life, the Lamb who was slain from the creation of the world.
Now, I saw this note. It says, "or written from creation of the world in the book of life belonging to the Lamb who was slain." So I guess there's some debate as to what the time frame written from the creation of the world, whether it's talking about names being put in the book of life before creation or Jesus being slain before creation. Now, I've often thought that this meant that Jesus was destined to be slain before creation, that was always the plan, that the plan of redemption before creation was that Jesus would die on the cross for redemption of and forgiveness of our sins. And I think that's what this verse is talking about, that there was no change of plan, there was no accidents, or God didn't make it up along the way, or just watch to see what would happen and then respond. He predetermined and planned out what was going to happen before it happened, and it worked out exactly the way he planned. That's what I believe. But whether this before creation refers to when our names were written in the book of life or when Jesus was determined or destined to die on the cross really makes no difference, because either way, it's saying that God made a plan beforehand, and it worked out exactly the way God wanted it to work out.
Whoever has ears, let them hear. If anyone is to go into captivity they will go. If anyone is to be killed with the sword they will be killed. This calls for patient endurance and faithfulness on the part of God's people.
So this is saying, this is a message to Christians in the first century about something that is going to imminently come to pass. The whole book of Revelation is written to specific people in a specific place at a specific time about things that were going to shortly take place. That's what the whole book of Revelation is about. So it was written to first century Christians, churches in Asia, about things that were about to take place in their lifetime. Now, Daniel says, seal up these words because they're many years from now. And then we have the book of Revelation that says, do not seal up these words because they are imminent. And they paint the same images, this image of the beast with 7 heads and 10 horns. I wanted to show you something. I don't know if this will work or not. Let's see. If I go to the camera and look at my screen, you can go to Wikipedia and do a search for list of emperors. And I don't know that Augustus here would be considered the first head, because Julius Caesar would most likely be the first head of the Roman Empire, I think, and he's not listed in this one. So I don't know whether you would count Augustus as 1 or as Augustus as maybe number 3 or whatever. But I find it interesting. It also tells over here the time in office. So Augustus was in office 40 years, Tiberius in 22 years, then Caligula 3 years, Claudius 13 years, and then Nero 13 years. And you see the time frame. This is Nero. He reigned from 54 AD to 68 AD. And I believe that Nero was the current Roman Caesar at the time of the writing of the book of Revelation. Now, I believe, look, right after Nero, because 70 AD is kind of the focal point of the destruction of the Jews and Jerusalem. And there were, remember, 3 horns that were plucked out by another horn that had pompous words and all that. But right after Nero, you have this Galba fella who reigned only 7 months, then Otho, who reigned 3 months, and then Vitellius, who reigned 8 months. And they all killed each other. What are you doing? They essentially were fighting for rule, and they killed each other or defeated each other, and then they committed suicide. So these 3 didn't reign very long, and they were supplanted or succeeded by Vespasian, who ruled during the destruction of Jerusalem in 70 AD. So you have December of 69 to 79. So for 10 years, Vespasian was the Caesar, or 9 years and 9.5 years. But he came right after 3 people who didn't last very long at all. So those 3 horns that were plucked out by another one very well could have been Galba, Otho, and Vitellius, who was plucked out by Vespasian. Now, we're going to see another reference in chapter 13 to Nero. But I wanted to show something else. It said there were 7 heads and 10 horns. If you do a search, 7 hills of Rome, and it was well known that Rome had 7 hills, and that's the name of them: Aventine, Caelian, Capitoline, whatever. And here's a picture of them. These were the 7 hills of Rome. And I believe that may have a lot to do with this beast that had 7 heads and 10 horns. The horns would be the Caesars, and 3 little horns plucked out by one that had a big mouth. And we see a little bit later another reference to Caesar Nero.
Then I saw a second beast coming out of the earth. It had 2 horns like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon.
All right, so it looked like a lamb, but it spoke like a dragon. So I believe the second beast is the Jews. They had their own agenda in the first century to do what they wanted to do. They came across as this gentle religious organization, but they were actually just full of death and corruption and Satan's influences. So I believe the second beast is the Jewish nation that during the time of the Roman Empire.
It exercised all the authority of the first beast on its behalf.
So the Jews exercised authority under the Roman Empire on behalf of the Roman Empire. So they had a lot of authority and power in the first century over their region and their people.
And made the earth and its inhabitants worship the first beast.
Okay, so this beast has something to do with organizing worship or leading worship, which gives it a religious organization.
Whose fatal wound had been healed.
Now the fatal wound was of the Roman Empire. Maybe one of the Caesars, or something happened that made maybe the Roman Empire look like it would be defeated, but then it was unstoppable and it couldn't be killed. That's what I guess made people so fearful of that beast or the Roman Empire, because it was just indestructible no matter what happened to it.
And it performed great signs, even causing fire to come down from heaven to the earth in full view of the people. Because of the signs it was given power to perform on behalf of the first beast, it deceived the inhabitants of the earth. It ordered them to set up an image in honor of the beast who was wounded by the sword and yet lived. The second beast was given power to give breath to the image of the first beast, so that the image could speak and cause all who refused to worship the image to be killed.
Now, this image, being set up, that sounds a little difficult to comprehend. The Jewish nation setting up idols, images of worship. So I don't think I understand exactly what this is. But these images could be figurative or symbolic and not literal, which most things in the book of Revelation is not literal. But it is symbolic language. So even if it's not setting up a physical idol to worship, if they are directing their people to not just submit, but to worship and glorify the Roman emperors and the empire itself, then that would be idolatry. And from God's eyes, there's no difference in whether you actually set up a physical image to worship or you just, what you demonstrate by your actions. Both of them are idolatry.
It also forced all people, great and small, rich and poor, free and slave, to receive a mark on their right hands or on their foreheads, so that they could not buy or sell unless they had the mark, which is the name of the beast or the number of its name.
All right. So this mark that people would receive on their right hands or foreheads, if I thought it said in here, if their names were not in the book of life or whatever. So if you weren't saved, or if you didn't put your faith in Jesus Christ alone, and essentially be willing to die for your faith, then everybody else would submit to this rule of having the mark of the beast. And again, I don't think it's literal, not like somebody's going to brand somebody with this mark either on their hand or forehead. But it could have been a coin, like putting the image of Caesar Nero on a coin. and you hold it in your right hand, and you can't buy anything unless you have this coin that has Nero's head on it, or an image of Nero. It could have been something like that. But we know that this number, this mark, is a number that represents a man. And we're about to read that verse.
This calls for wisdom. Let the person who has insight calculate the number of the beast, for it is the number of a man. That number is 666.
All right, so people often act like the number 666 is some satanic number that, if you see those 3 6s in a row, that like Satan's going to jump out of a mirror at you and cut your throat or something crazy. But that it has nothing to do with that. This says, verse 18, this calls for wisdom. So whoever is smart or intelligent, calculate the number of the beast, for it is a number of a man, and his number is 666. Now, in Hebrew, each letter was associated with a number, just like Roman numerals for us today, where X equals 10, V equals 5, and I equals 1. But every single letter of the Hebrew alphabet is associated with a number. And if Nero was the current Caesar during the time of the writing of the book of Revelation, which I think he was the Caesar up until 68 AD, so it was written during that time about the things that were going to happen in 70 AD under the reign of, Vespasian? Yeah. After the 3 Caesars had been supplanted or, short-lived. But when you put Caesar Nero in Hebrew and add up the numbers, it adds up to 666. It adds up to 666. The letters of his name, just like Roman numerals for us today. If you write out XIV, then that would be 14, I think. XIV would be 14. But if you do it the Hebrew way, you put the Hebrew letters out, spell Caesar Nero, each letter equals a number. You add them up, and it comes up to 666. Now, they clearly were talking about the Roman Empire. If they knew the book of Daniel, they knew about the 4 kingdoms that were coming after the Babylonian Empire, and then you hear about the different heads and the different horns of the Roman Empire, and then they would look at whoever was currently their head of the Roman Empire and add up the number of his name, and it would be 666. They said, clearly we're talking about the Roman Empire, and the current head is Caesar Nero. And then whenever those next 3 guys right after Nero were killed off and destroyed by corruption, they said, there goes one horn is supplanted, 2 horns, 3 horns. Now we've got this other guy who's got a big mouth and a blasphemous name. It would be maybe Vespasian. Now, I don't know a lot about the rule of Vespasian, but I do know that he was the ruler during the time of the destruction of Jerusalem and the Jewish temple in 70 AD. So I think that's what this stuff is talking about. So I would enjoy reading your thoughts and comments along these lines.